Hi everybody, and welcome to this revision video where I go through neurotransmitters and neurotransmission as part of the neuropsychology topic for stage 1 psychology. Let's get started. So in my previous video, I went through the parts of a neuron. So extending from that, this video is all about how this transmission process takes place through the different neurons in our body. So the sensory, the motor, and of course the interneurons as well. So the message is electrical as it travels down the neuron, but the message then converts to a chemical one between the neurons. So we're going to explain that process in this video in a little bit more detail. So transmission of information between neurons involves both electrical and chemical processes. So by doing this, it enables the information to travel from one neuron to the next in a very quick and efficient manner. So neurons transmit information using neural impulses, which are a combination of electrical and chemical energy. So a neural impulse only travels the length of the neuron. Once the neural information reaches the end of the axon, the neuron uses chemical energy to ensure the message continues, and this chemical energy is the neurotransmitter. So the activation of a single neural impulse is not enough to create a response, so it must stimulate the neurons around it for a noticeable activity to occur. So it actually takes millions of neurons to be activated together for complex behaviors to occur and neurotransmitters to be released that then affect our behavior. So each neuron is separated from the next neuron, as we know, by a tiny gap called the synaptic gap. I talked about that in my previous video. So neural information passes across the gap from the axon terminal to the dendrites of the neighboring neuron. So the point of communication between the neurons is called the synapse. And it's at the synapse that the electrical message changes to the chemical message. So when the neural impulse reaches the end of the axon, the synaptic knob releases chemicals called neurotransmitters. And these neurotransmitters are chemical substances manufactured by the neuron itself. So these are our main neurotransmitters that we focus on in stage 1 psychology. So we have adrenaline, which no doubt you would have heard of, which is responsible for the flight or fight response. We have noradrenaline, which is responsible for concentration specifically. We have dopamine, which is our pleasure neurotransmitter, serotonin, which affects our mood. We have GABA or GABA, which is our calming neurotransmitter. So that's often activated when our parasympathetic nervous system kicks in. Acetylcholine, which is really important for learning as well as memory and learning retention. We have glutamate, which is responsible for memory as well, and endorphins, which provide us a sense of euphoria and happiness. So neurotransmitters have two different effects depending on what they are. So they have excitatory, so to stimulate a neural impulse in another neuron, or inhibitory, so to block the recipient neuron from firing, depending on obviously what's needed at the time. So neurotransmitters have specific shapes, as you can see here, that bind to receptor sites of the same shape on the postsynaptic neuron. So in order to do that, in order to communicate effectively, they need to bind to the postsynaptic neuron and have a specific shape to allow them to fit in accordingly, to allow the message to get through. So let's look at neurotransmitters in a little bit more detail. So neurotransmitters have been shown to have a range of different effects on human behavior. Starting with acetylcholine, it's found in all motor neurons and signals our muscles to contract. Some more info about acetylcholine is that nicotine can copy acetylcholine and increase heart rate and breathing rate. So that's why we know that nicotine is a stimulant, because it does that process. We have norepinephrine, okay, which is psychological arousal, or its impact, I should say, is psychological arousal, making us feel awake, allows us to learn effectively, and also can influence our mood. And this is involved when our nervous system prepares us for flight or fight response as well as adrenaline, obviously. Then we have dopamine, which is the regulation of our emotional responses. So the use of stimulants like cocaine and speed, so illicit stimulants, triggers the release of dopamine, hence why they are seen as very addictive substances, because the release of dopamine feels good to us as human beings. So the stimulants of cocaine and speed triggers the release of it, hence why it's so addictive. We also have serotonin. So this affects our mood and the onset of sleep as well. So when serotonin is removed too quickly, depression can result. So often we hear about this, and there is a direct correlation between low serotonin levels and depression diagnoses. And of course, endorphins. So the impact of endorphins are on our pain relief and produces a state of euphoria. So the higher our endorphins, the less we feel pain. And it's similar to morphine and codeine effects. So it can also be released when we are stressed or anxious, but that can also be translated into good stress or eustress, which is like excitement. So it's similar to morphine and codeine in terms of having certain pain relieving functions as well. So there are more neurotransmitters, but that's what we focus on at Year 11 level. So I hope you found this video useful. As always, if you've got any questions, shoot me an email or ask me in class. Otherwise, happy revising.